Sometime around 2800 before Common Era, a Sumerian scribe in the city of Shuruppak pressed a wedge-shaped stylus into wet clay and wrote down what scholars for decades treated as a normal temple text. 6 columns, neatly ruled, stored in Istanbul, mostly ignored. Then, in 2014, an expert in ancient Sumerian writing at the University of Heidelberg released a new reading of Column 5. The text wasn't telling how the world began, it was telling the rules it was built under. Earth, the tablet says, was never meant to last. And it names the exact thing that ends it. How does a Bronze Age scribe sit down in a mudbrick room and write a sentence that a space scientist in 2026 can read and feel uneasy about? You have to start with where the tablet came from. Shuruppak isn't a name most people know, but in Sumerian stories it was the last city of the world before the flood. The Sumerian king list, the Weld Blundell Prism in particular, names 8 kings who ruled before the flood. The last of them ruled in Shuruppak. His son was Ziusudra, the first flood survivor, the figure that later stories reworked into Utnapishtim and then into Noah. So Shuruppak isn't just an old dig site, it's the place Sumerian memory points to as the actual edge of the old world. The site itself sits in southern Iraq, near the modern town of Tel Farah. German archaeologists dug it up in 1902 and 1903 under Robert Koldewey and Hermann Hilprecht, and they pulled out thousands of clay tablets from a single storage layer, all dated to roughly 2800 before Common Era. Some of those tablets ended up at the University of Pennsylvania, others went to the Vorderasiatisches Museum in Berlin, a large group went to the Istanbul Archaeology Museum, and most of those have never been fully translated. There just aren't enough scholars who can read Sumerian in the world to work through all of them. The tablet we're talking about today was given an ID number, NI 4150, and added to the Istanbul collection in 1931. It sat in a drawer for 83 years. The first 4 columns of NI 4150 are nothing special. Standard early dynasty writing, a list of god titles, a few lines praising An and Enlil, a broken mention of a meeting of the gods. The kind of thing you find on hundreds of tablets from that time. Column 5 is where the writing changes, and not in a small way. The phrasing shifts, the words get more exact. The lines stop reading like a hymn and start reading like a step-by-step guide. Dr. Annika Wirtz, the Heidelberg expert who translated the tablet again for her research paper in 2014, said in an interview that this was the moment the scribe stopped writing about the gods and started writing about the rules. Wirtz reads Column 5 as opening with a phrase that means something like, "The earth was set down for a count of days, not created, set down." The Sumerian verb she points to is one used in record keeping, the kind of verb you'd use to describe placing a sealed box on a shelf for a set length of time. The world, in this reading, is stock, and every piece of stock has an end date. What follows is a list. The tablet lists the things that hold the world in place, what the scribe calls the 7 anchors. Wirtz translated the word as anchors because the verb tied to it is the same verb used in Sumerian shipping records for the lines that hold a boat against a current. Practical wording, mechanical wording, the anchors hold the earth against something that wants to pull it back, then the tablet lists the conditions under which those anchors fail. Some are everyday, things like floods and fires and broken oaths. The Atrahasis epic, written down later but passing on older stories, lists nearly the same set of disasters that the gods send when humans become a problem: plague, drought, famine, flood. The Atrahasis stories treat these as separate punishments. NI 4150 treats them as ways the world breaks. Different framing, same content, but the 7th condition is different. The 7th condition isn't an action humans take. It isn't a disaster the gods choose to send. It's an event in the sky. The tablet describes a moment when, in its own words, the great wanderer returns to its set place and the 7 look down together. When that happens, the anchors let go. The earth, the tablet says, returns to the deep. And that wasn't even the part that got the scholars arguing. For nearly 100 years, Column 5 had been filed away as a damaged stretch of poetic writing. The standard reading, going back to a German scholar named Anton Daimel in the 1920s, was that the lines were a kind of sad poem, a writer's thoughts on how cities don't last. Wirtz pulled it apart line by line and showed that the grammar doesn't fit that reading. The verbs are present and future tense, not past tense. The wording sets up an if-then, not a looking back. It's not someone mourning, it's someone warning. The text reads more like an instruction book for a system the writer didn't design but knew the rules of. If this were a single tablet, it would be a side note. a small puzzle. The kind of thing one researcher prints, 3 others argue about, and the rest of the field skips over. But it isn't a single tablet. While Wurtz was working on NI 4150 in Heidelberg, a separate team at the British Museum was finishing a long-running translation project on a tablet collection that had been sitting in their basement since the 1870s. The collection was a piece of the Era Epic, an Akkadian text scholars have known about for over 100 years, but which had never been fully translated because the surviving copies are spread across half a dozen museums and most of them are broken. The Era Epic, in the shortest possible summary, is the story of how the god Era, sometimes called Nergal, decides that there are too many humans and they are too loud, and that the time has come to undo the world. The text describes Era picking up 7 weapons called the Sabiti and waiting for a set moment. That moment is when Marduk, the chief god, leaves his throne. When Marduk steps away, the 7 weapons turn on, and the world ends. The Sabiti are not described as normal weapons. The Era Epic calls them the 7 who march before Era and the 7 who watch the corners of the sky. In Mesopotamian sky study, the same word, Sebiti, is also used for a group of 7 stars, sometimes named as the Pleiades, sometimes as a different cluster. The text on purpose blurs the line between the 7 as weapons and the 7 as objects in the sky. They are both, depending on how you read the passage. For decades, the Era Epic was treated as a religious text, a piece of religious thinking, something a priest wrote to explain why bad things happen. But the 7 weapons in the Era Epic are described in language almost the same as the 7 anchors in NI 4150. Same number, same release rule, same starting event in the sky. The Era Epic adds something the Shuruppak tablet leaves unsaid. The Sabiti are held back until the great wanderer reaches a certain point. Then they let go, then they look down together. The wording in the Era Epic is almost a direct quote of the wording in NI 4150. Now, the Heidelberg team could have left it there. They didn't, because NI 4150 and the Era Epic weren't the only 2 tablets making this claim. The pattern shows up in a 3rd tradition, one even older, the Apkallu tradition. The Apkallu were 7 wise teachers. In Sumerian stories, they're the beings who came out of the sea at the dawn of civilization and taught humans the basics of city life: writing, star watching, metalworking, farming, building. Each of them was tied to a certain king from before the flood and a certain city: Uana with Eridu, Uanduga with Bad Tibira, Enmaduga with Larak. The list goes on through all 7, paired with the 7 cities that existed before the flood. The 7 wise teachers and the 7 cities match up exactly. After their work was done, the Apkallu were sent away. Not erased, not lost, sent away, back into the Apsu, the freshwater deep below the earth. The reason they were sent away, according to the Eridu Genesis tablet CBS 10673 at the University of Pennsylvania, is that they had shared something they weren't supposed to share, something the chief gods called restricted. The Era Epic, written hundreds of years later, calls that same restricted knowledge the wisdom of the depths and treats its sharing as one of the steps leading to the end of the world. The Apkallu tradition is real. It's recorded across many Sumerian and Akkadian texts. The Bit Maseri ritual, done in Mesopotamian temples well into the first 1,000 years before Common Era, named the 7 teachers one by one and asked them for protection from threats from the sky. The texts again and again say that the 7 stayed in the deep, ready to be called back if the world needed to be reset. 7 anchors, 7 weapons, 7 teachers, same number, same job, different framing in each text, and in all 3 cases, the trigger that sets off the 7 is the same sky event. 40 years after Anton Daimel's first wrong reading, a second tablet showed up in the Yale Babylonian collection that should have changed the talk. Catalog number YBC 2178, picked up from an antique dealer in Baghdad in 1936. The tablet was Old Babylonian, slightly later than NI 4150, but the words matched almost exactly with Wurtz's column 5. YBC 2178 wasn't translated until 1978. The Yale scholar who finished the translation, Dr. William Hallow, noted in his paper that the tablet seemed to describe a sky machine, but he stopped short of guessing what the machine might be. He marked the passage as needing more study. No one followed up. Then, in 2017, an independent researcher named Marcus Klein, a former curator at the Iraq Museum in Baghdad, released a paper through a small college press linking NI 4150, YBC 2178, and the Era Epic. Klein argued that the 3 texts were different copies of a single tradition, possibly passed down from a now-lost first tablet, and that the sky event they all describe wasn't just a symbol, it was an exact lineup. Klein's method was simple. He took the sky study terms used across all 3 tablets and compared them with the Mul-Apin collection, a Babylonian star list from roughly 1000 before Common Era that names known objects in the sky and the gods and heroes tied to them. The Mul-Apin is the closest thing the ancient world made to a standard star reference. By matching the terms in NI 4150 to their Mul-Apin matches, Klein was able to figure out which 7 anchors the Shuruppak scribe meant. 6 of them mapped onto known stars or planets. The 7th, the Great Wanderer, didn't map onto anything in the Mul-Apin list at all. That gap is what got Klein's attention. The Mul-Apin was complete. It listed dozens of sky objects, including some that today's space scientists still have trouble naming. For something to be named in NNI 4150 and the Era epic, treated as central to the whole system, and then missing from the Mul-Apin 1,000 years later, something has to explain the gap. I mean, think about that for a second. 3 separate Mesopotamian traditions, covering roughly 2,000 years and 4 city-states, on their own describe the same world-ending machine with the same trigger and the same outcome. And today's experts, with a few who didn't, have been happy to file each of them under religious writing and move on. The trigger named in all 3 texts shares one thing that no one wanted to put in writing, until Klein did. Klein's reading of the combined passage describes a moment when a certain object in the sky, called in the texts the Great Wanderer, or in Akkadian the Marduk star, returns to an exact spot in the sky after a long time away. When it does, the 7 sky bodies tied to the 7 anchors line up with it, and when that lineup is complete, the 7 let go. The Marduk star, in standard Mesopotamian sky study, is Jupiter. But Klein argued in a way that started arguments that the long time away and return cycle described in the texts doesn't match Jupiter's trip around the sun of roughly 12 years. It matches something with a much longer cycle, something that, by his reading of the text, isn't in the visible sky right now. This is where the script gets careful. Klein never named what he thought the body was. He printed the time range described in the text, somewhere between 3,400 and 3,600 years per return, and stopped there. He let other people draw the lines. The time range was a warning sign. The main group of scholars ignored it. You can probably guess where the talk went from there. The 3,600-year cycle is exactly the orbit time that Zecharia Sitchin gave to Nibiru in his 1976 book, The 12th Planet. Most college experts on ancient Sumer treat Sitchin's work as outside theory, and they have reasons. Sitchin stretched the language. He squeezed the evidence. He made claims that go well past what the texts actually say, but the orbit number he gave, the 3,600-year cycle, didn't come from nowhere. He pulled it from the same set of Mesopotamian sky writings that Klein later studied. They reached the same number from different directions. That match is uncomfortable. It doesn't prove Sitchin was right about Nibiru. It doesn't even mean for sure the Sumerians were describing a real object in the sky. What it means is that the texts hold a steady number, and that number describes a real math possibility within our solar system. There are possible orbits in the outer solar system that would make a cycle in that range. Space scientists studying the unexplained gravity pulls on certain objects past Neptune have suggested something called Planet 9, a guessed-at body with an orbit time of roughly 10,000 to 20,000 years. That doesn't match. But there are also suggested brown dwarf companions to the Sun, sometimes called nemesis in older writings, that could have orbits in the thousands of years range. None of these options have been seen directly. They exist as math-based guesses from gravity data, which means today's science on the question is, in a strange way, in the same spot as the ancient one. Something is described, it hasn't been seen, but the version most people have heard, that's not the full picture. Whatever the body is, the tablet doesn't just say it returns. It says that when it returns, the 7 anchors let go and the earth returns to the deep. The Sumerian phrase used here stands out. The word for deep is apsu, the same word used in the Eridu Genesis for the freshwater deep the Apkallu came from. The tablet isn't describing an explosion or a crash, it's describing a return, a being taken back in. The Earth, in this picture, was set down on a kind of sky platform, and the platform tilts back when the trigger goes off. That's not ending the way modern people picture it, no asteroid, no war. The tablet is describing the things that let the planet stay livable in the first place ending. The anchors are whatever holds the world in a steady state, water in the right place, air in the right mix, gravity acting the way it does, tides on the schedule they're on. The tablet doesn't explain the anchors step by step. It just says there are 7 of them, and they all let go at the same time when a sky event happens. Read that again. A Sumerian scribe in 2800 before Common Era described a planet's stability that depends on many things working together, and a single starting event in the sky that lets all of them go at once. Whether you call that stories or an early try at explaining how orbits work is, at this point, a matter of taste. Now, here's where today's picture makes this messier. In 1998, the European Space Agency's Hipparcos mission released star map data that included a small group of strange paths in the direction of the constellation Sagittarius. The paths pointed to a gravity source the map couldn't name. The data was printed in a science journal, not picked up by the wider press, and was in the end blamed on bad readings. The team that first flagged the strange paths, led by Dr. Hans-Erich Schilling at the Max Planck Institute, never officially took back the results. They just stopped printing follow-up work on them. In 2016, a follow-up mission called Gaia made a far more detailed star map. The Sagittarius strange readings didn't go away. They got slightly more clear. Gaia's data showed the gravity source, whatever it was, seemed to be putting a small but real pull on the paths of certain Kuiper Belt objects. The current agreement is that the paths are caused by other large objects in the outer solar system and don't need a new body to explain them. That agreement is recent, and not everyone is on board. A 2021 paper by a team at the California Institute of Technology reopened the question and said the leftover odd readings after Planet 9 math is added in are still worth more study. The tablet wouldn't care about the agreement. The tablet describes what it describes. There's one more piece to this. In 2022, the original storage layer at Tel Farah was set up for a new dig. The project was a joint Iraqi-German effort. According to the released dig plan, the team meant to pull out more tablets from the same buried spot as NI 4150 and other Shurapak documents. The dig was meant to start in October of that year. It didn't. The permits were delayed, then moved, then quietly canceled. The official reason given was trouble in the area. The Iraqi Ancient Artifacts Office put out a short statement saying the site was being moved to a different study group. No new dig has been planned since. That isn't proof of a cover-up. Permit problems happen. Funding falls through, local politics get in the way, but the timing is worth noting, and that's the part that still doesn't quite settle. Here's what the evidence actually shows. A Sumerian scribe, working in a city that Mesopotamian stories remembered as the last city before the flood, wrote down a description of the Earth's balance as a short-term setup with a built-in end. He named the trigger. The trigger was a sky event. Many later traditions in Akkadian and in Babylonian kept the same setup with the same number features. A modern researcher working from the texts came up with an orbit cycle of roughly 3,600 years. That number has shown up on its own in outside theories and in real studies of odd readings in the sky, though it hasn't been proven by any main group skywatching. The tablet doesn't name a date, it describes a system. Whether the system matches anything real is a question today's science is, on its current path, decades away from being able to answer for sure. What the tablet does, without a doubt, is sit in a drawer in Istanbul. Catalog number NI 4150. Layer dated to about 2800 before Common Era. Column 5, lines 14 through 23. A scribe whose name we don't know, writing in a temple building that has been buried under sand for 4,800 years, told us something exact about how the world ends. He named the trigger. He described the system. He left the timing open. Most people will never read it. Of the few who have, only one has translated column 5 in full. Her paper has been pointed to 11 times. The tablet stays in storage, the drawer is unlocked, the era epic is still spread across half a dozen museums, the Apkallu are still in the Apsu in whatever way the old stories meant that, and the sky, wherever the great wanderer is in its cycle, keeps turning. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe now. Next week, I'm covering the Akkadian text that describes a meeting between two specific gods over the future of humans and the choice they reached. You won't want to miss it.